Team Note the Models, Economic Insights from Large-Scale Nitrogen Modeling. My name is Germán Mandrini. I'm a postdoc at Purdue University. And we made this presentation together with Ignacio Ciampiti, who is a professor also at Purdue University. So the agenda for today, we will talk about the background, which is nitrogen decision-making. And we will present 3 blocks of evidence. The first 2 are meant to answer if current nitrogen recommendation models are good enough. And the third block is we are going to see if farmers use those models. Then we will talk about the implications of those blocks of evidence. And finally, we will think about future research and where we should be going. So the background is the nitrogen decision challenge. Basically, farmers have to decide how much nitrogen they have to apply. That follows the response to nitrogen rate follows an optimum curve where the profits, the profits related to nitrogen rate follows a profits curve. If the rate is too low, then the farmer has low profits, and if it is too high, also they have low profits, and it has it damages water quality and greenhouse gases emissions. Water quality is important because all the nitrogen leaching from the corn area generates local impacts in groundwater, lakes, rivers, and it moves down to the Mississippi River, to the ocean, where it makes a dead zone. And greenhouse gases emissions, we are familiar with the effects that it has on climate. So the challenge is to select a nitrogen rate that represents a good balance and allows to maintain production and profitability while reducing environmental losses. And we had to do this early in the season before we know how the weather will be like and how that will affect the crop and the soil conditions. So for the first block of evidence, we use large-scale modeling. We have a simulated data set. It was done with AppSim. And we have 4,270 fields in Illinois and 30 years of data. So each field has up to 3 soils, and on each soil we simulated increasing nitrogen rates. So that gave us a total of 64,000 response curves. So we use this data to evaluate different nitrogen management strategies that I will explain next. And the beauty of this data set is that it allows us to do long-term comparison of these nitrogen management strategies. So nitrogen is so variable that many times when we do empirical trials, the results depend a lot on which year you made the trials, and we try to solve by that issue by having many years of data and always comparing the strategies on the same fields. We also focus on making ex-ante predictions. So to be realistic, we made the predictions in B5, and the model will not know what will happen later, which is mimicking what a real farmer that is deciding what to apply early in the season will face. And then we did cross-validation using the leave 1 year out approach. So it's the same. If we are making predictions for 2026, we have trial data up to the 2025 harvest. We don't know anything from 2026. So to avoid that data leakage, we separated the sets, and we made predictions with a set of years, and we used the year that was not part of the training as testing. So I mentioned that we use that data to evaluate different nitrogen management strategies. So how did we design those strategies? Basically, we went to the literature and we look at different ways of recommending nitrogen that have contrasting views. So we found 4 factors. One is the origin of the data. So we saw many researchers that focus on running on-farm trials and using those trials to make recommendations for farmers on those same fields. So the trial and the field where the model is used is the same. Another approach is to have research stations that are more controlled and might have a trial manager where we generate the trials that are used to make models that make predictions for farmer fields that are different. Another factor is the modeling approaches. So we have researchers recommending or using dynamic models where they use variables to predict the best nitrogen rate for each field, and sometimes even like field and year. So the model has conditions that allow to predict according to the field what the best rate will be. Another approach is more static, and this consists of making regional models where researchers will find regions that have similar weather and soils, run trials there, and make a recommendation for the whole region. So it's static because it doesn't change by year, and all the fields in the region will get the same recommendation. Another classification factor is the technology. We found many researchers defending that we should be using site-specific management or variable rate to recommend nitrogen, and others that suggest that a single rate, especially in flat fields in the Midwest, works fine. Finally, the last factor that we use for these strategies is the information. So many researchers focus on having detailed soil sampling information, while others think that is too expensive, and they rely on low-cost variables for proxying what is happening. They use low-cost variables to proxy what happens in the soil. So we combine all these factors on this table with 10 nitrogen management strategies. Basically are the factors that I mentioned before, and their different levels in all the combinations possible. Don't pay too much attention. What you need to understand is that the first row is our benchmark. Is MRTN, so it means maximum return to nitrogen, which is the way that currently universities in the Midwest use to recommend nitrogen. So it is based on trial data, and it is static. It doesn't use any soil sampling information, and is meant to be used for uniform rates. So all the fields in the region receive the same recommendation, and it requires very little inputs from the farmers, only the region, the corn and nitrogen price, and the previous crop. The other 9 are our more advanced ways to recommend nitrogen. So these are a combination of different factors. They use machine learning. Some of them use high information, so soil sampling. They have weather data. They have crop data. They can use variable rate or uniform rate. So it's like we're trying to see, or the idea was to beat MRTN, basically. We were like, MRTN is too simple. Let's do more advanced models that will increase the profit for the farmers. So imagine that for my 4,000 fields that I show in the previous slide, I had 10 experts coming every year and telling me, this is your nitrogen rate. And then I aggregate the results from all those recommendations across all my fields and years and see which of these experts did better, right? So these are the results across different variables. So we can see the yield, the nitrogen leaching, the average N rate that they recommended, the profits, and the RMSE. The RMSE is the root mean square error. So it tells us how accurate the model was. The lowest that value is, that means that the model recommended nitrogen closer to what ended up being the best nitrogen rate. So the main takeaways from these tables is that MRTN was the most profitable strategy. Our advanced strategies failed to justify the extra effort. So if you look at the profits only, 2 of our strategies had $1 more than MRTN, but they require soil sampling or local trials. It will not, like $1 will not cover the cost of all that. However, they were more accurate. They had lower RMSE. So if you look at the RMSE column, the other strategies had lower RMSE and had lower leaching. So they reduced leaching. This has 2 consequences. One is a paradigm change. As I said at the beginning, we wanted to design models that were more accurate, that will increase profits for farmers, and farmers will love these models and use it. We didn't do that. We increased accuracy, but that didn't translate into higher profits. We did, that was a puzzle initially, so we did another paper explaining that, where we compare dynamic and static models, and we explain why a model can be more accurate, but that didn't increase profits. And then the other consequence is that there is an opportunity to monetize externalities. So we saw that the nitrogen leaching was lower. We didn't measure greenhouse gases emissions, but they will also be lower. They are very correlated. So if we can monetize that and sort of like put those environmental benefits into the profits column, then there are incentives for farmers to use those advanced models. Let's look at the second block of evidence. The idea is that that research that I show first is not the only one that is finding that simple models work relatively well. There is this data from PCM, which is Precision Conservation Management in Illinois, where they have many farmers sharing finance data and productive data. And what they found is that on the last 5 years, the last 5 years out of the last 8, the farmers that were applying nitrogen on the MRTN range, they were the most profitable ones from all these farmers. The 3 years when the MRTN was not the most profitable one, it was too high. So the best rate was actually lower than MRTN. And that's a bit like farmers usually feel that MRTN is too low and that's why they don't trust it and they apply more. But this is showing that it was the best, or 3 years it was actually a bit high. And then there is this other research that I really like from Ransom in 2020. They had 49 trials across 8 states in the Midwest and 3 years. And they tested around 20 nitrogen recommendation tools. So this is all empirical data. And what they found is that so some of these recommendation models are based on crop modeling, some on tissue sampling, some on soil sampling. What they found is that MRTN was the most profitable one. So the difference is not significant, but still, MRTN required none of all those things that I mentioned and was among the top in terms of profits. So this is showing that models, or at least the model that universities are using, is relatively good at maximizing profits. Do farmers use these models? We have data from Sellers in 2020, where they have survey data from farmers in Illinois, and they compare the rate that the farmers are using with the science-based recommendation in Illinois. And they found that 64% of the farmers over-apply nitrogen by more than 21 kilograms. It has a distribution, so there are some farmers that 5% are applying even more than 80 kilograms per hectare. There is also data from Hauser in 2022, where they found that 44% of the farmers over-apply nitrogen above the MRTN upper limit. So MRTN has an optimal rate and an area where profits don't change much. So these farmers are applying even above that upper end. So the reasons, there are many behavioral economics studies, but we can mention behavioral and cultural factors. So that idea that farmers don't trust the university recommendations and they think that they are too low. Risk aversion, so farmers fear yield losses more than they value fertilizer savings. Legacy of yield goal methods that were used in the past, that they tend to over-recommend nitrogen, especially in high-yielding soils of the Midwest. And many farmers still use fertilizer to maximize yield instead of profit. So they are applied at the agronomic optimum nitrogen rate instead of the economic optimum nitrogen rate. So what are the implications of these findings? The first 2 blocks of evidence shows that current models are relatively good and that more accuracy might not translate into more adoption. So that idea that I mentioned, or that assumption that more accuracy means more profit, that means more adoption, might not be true. And then the third block says that farmers don't use those recommendations and they tend to over-apply. So if accuracy doesn't pay, maybe it's time to change our objectives. So we propose a shift of focus, and we think that adoption won't come from building more nitrogen recommendation models. We need to innovate at the adoption stage. So we need to add incentives for farmers to use those models, right? And promoting adoption will be a more effective use of funding. So thinking about this, and this is more like an open discussion, maybe there are a lot of other ways, but we are working on three possible innovation paths related to adoption. One is the nitrogen insurance. Another one is nitrogen adoption programs and carbon credit systems. And the third one is autonomous multi-split systems. So in terms of nitrogen insurance, this is a paper that is it's under review currently, where what we propose is that farmers that over-apply nitrogen, so in that distribution that I showed before, those that 64%, that they don't trust the science-based recommendation, they use their nitrogen rate on a proportion of the field. For this research, we assume 10% of the field, and they adopt the science-based recommendation on the other 90. And then farmers pay a premium that is half of the nitrogen they are saving when they adopt the science-based recommendation. So if a farmer is applying 230 and the science-based recommendation is 180 kilograms per hectare, let's say that 1 kilogram is $1, so they are saving 50. Then they will pay $25 as a premium. $25 is an upfront cost reduction. At harvest, we compare the profits of their area and the science-based area. If their profits are higher, they get paid and compensated for that difference. So we evaluated this and we found that it is commercially viable. The program will generate $14 $14 per hectare increased profits for farmers, and $10 for the insurer. So what this means is that it's not something that needs subsidies or anything like that. The premium that we are getting is enough to run the program. And we want this to be profitable because we don't want it to depend on policies and political shifts. And also, we want it to generate profits that allow the program to be sustainable over time. We also found that it will provide a 31% nitrate leaching reduction in the insured area, and also greenhouse gases emissions reductions, both from fertilizer manufacturing and from N2O emissions from the fields. So another of the approaches related to increasing incentives for farmers to adopt science-based models. We are working on a review that is a collaboration between our lab and EDF, and is led by Francisco Palmero, where we are reviewing national and regional programs designed to promote more efficient nitrogen fertilizer use. We are looking at programs that target any of the 4 R's. So we look at many, and we found through 3 dominant incentive structures. So there is a group of programs that we call adoption programs, where they pay farmers to follow science-based rates. So basically, there is a donor, usually an industry, that will make some claims, environmental claims, that gives money to an administrator that is usually a farmer organization or an NGO that pays farmers to reduce their nitrogen rate. Another of the approaches is more related to carbon credit systems, that it rewards reduced CO2 emissions. So these programs have require farmers to make a change in some practice, like adopt no-till or cover crops or enhance fertilizer. And there is a model that estimates carbon emissions with and without that practice. And then the farmer gets paid for that difference in carbon emissions. And then some other programs are more insurance. So the insurance that I mentioned first is trying to reduce nitrogen rates. This one is focused on the timing of the application. So this one is called PACE and is currently available. And what it does is some farmers don't do split applications because they fear that if it rains too much, they will not be able to enter the field late in the season. So this insurance covers that risk. The farmers pay a premium, and if it rains too much, the insurance will pay them to compensate for the not being able to apply that nitrogen. So another of the potential approaches that we see is more futuristic, and imagine that in the future we have this type of robots that are able to enter the field multiple times. Maybe they are electric, it's very cheap to push a button and they go and apply nitrogen. So that allows to have more efficiency in nitrogen application. So we could match the application with the uptake of the curve. That allow us to also have more in-season information. So we could put sensors on these robots that target that measure the nitrogen status of the crop. We could use metrics like one that we have been working in our lab that is called nitrogen nutrition index, and using that we could apply nitrogen according to what the crop is needing, and that removes the emotional side of the decision. So currently farmers apply sometimes too much because they fear not having enough, but if they have the ability to make corrections during the season, then that risk is lower and they might be willing to reduce the nitrogen rate. And also, if they trust the sensors and the algorithms, then they can base the decision more on what is happening in the crop during the season instead of on intuition about what will be, like how the season will be. So the conclusion is one thing that I want to be very clear: we need to keep having nitrogen trials and updating nitrogen models. I'm not saying that we don't. There is research showing that the EONR is increasing. We have short corn, so we need to keep generating data for feeding these models. But accuracy is unlikely to drive adoption. Like, keep thinking that we will make a model that is so accurate that farmers will use it. Maybe we need to rethink that assumption. This is only like 2 papers that I show. We might need to do more, but I think we need to challenge that assumption. And I really like this phrase that is: innovation in incentives will do more for sustainability than another generation of nitrogen models. So adding incentives for farmers to use the models we have is the best we can do, instead of having more models that farmers don't use them. So that's it. Thank you so much. And yeah, this is more like an invitation to think together mostly. So if there are any comments or idea, welcome to do that. Thank you. Any questions? We have very little time, but we can take one. What do you mean by decision support tools? Like other models that? Mm-hmm. Not sure if I get it. So some of the models are like, for that paper that I showed from Ransom in 2020. Those are decision support tools that are, yes, they are available for farmers, so farmers can use them. MRTN is also available for farmers. So yeah, like according to this, the MRTN, for example, was the most profitable of all those 20 models. So that, like, it was the one that maximized profits. Yeah. Right. Like, the idea is that I think many times or at least what I thought when I started working on this is, I will make a model that will be super accurate and will provide more profits. And they were more accurate, but they didn't increase profits. So Like, okay, MRTN, which is the one that the universities currently use, is good enough. And I think that now we should focus in making farmers use that model because farmers don't use it and they over apply and with all the environmental consequences. Thank you. Better over time, you mean? Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So the idea is that the insurance is for farmers that don't trust the recommendations and they over apply, right? If the recommendations are good, then farmers will start to. It will be like a transition tool, and farmers will adopt the science-based recommendation over time. So they will pay a premium, and they will see that they don't get a compensation. If that happens 10 years, then they will say, okay, I will just use the science-based recommendation. So it's yeah, it's like a tool that will de-risk that transition towards the science-based recommendation. Thank you. Yeah. Mhm. You mean adopting those more advanced models? They require information that has a cost, right? Uh, yes, I think for the first block of evidence that I show, we didn't consider that extra cost, so the cost of doing soil sampling. So the idea is that if we saw that one of the models increased profits by $10, we need to compare to think if that will be enough to pay for the cost of getting that information, right? But yeah, we didn't consider those costs, and still the models did not increase profits. To yeah, they didn't increase profits, so it wouldn't cover the extra cost. Good question. Thank you.
Um, with this, we are at the end of the symposium, and thank you everyone for coming to the symposium, and thank you the presenters who made this symposium successful. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the day.